This is getting out of hand in what has been one of the craziest days in recent memory for Toronto Blue Jays fans. A day where multiple reporters, including reliable beat writers, reliable insiders, have come out and said the Jays are in advanced talks to sign Pete Alonso. On the other side of things, you have Ben Nicholson-Smith coming out and dropping a bombshell of a report of his own, and then you have reporters going at each other. It is absolutely ridiculous. The situation is getting crazier and crazier. And reports are indicating that the Jays and Pete Alonso are reaching a deal or approaching a deal. But as the minutes go on, as the hours go on, more and more reports come out, and the situation is getting completely out of hand and something we haven't really seen before. So to break down those reports and discuss what this means going forward, as this changes a lot for the Jays offseason. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Again, I'm traveling right now, so bear with the background, bear with the camera and all these different things. But in the meantime, if you want to, support the grind, 3 videos in a day, again, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been one of the wildest days in recent memory. Now, obviously, you have the Shohei Ohtani day, the Juan Soto day, the Roki Sasaki day, which all kind of take the cake. But when you're talking about this specific team and what is happening right now, I covered it in the video earlier. It started with a bunch of rumors from guys who aren't necessarily reporters. And then today, it advanced to actual reports. Now, this is Andy Martino, one of the most reliable New York beat writers there is. And he said talks between Pete Alonso and the Jays are advancing per a source with knowledge, not done yet, and no guarantee that it gets there. So this comes out, and this is from Andy Martino. Again, this is a reliable reporter. This guy is legit. He's saying the talks are advancing. You also, in this, have a bunch of other things. You have Hector Gomez coming out. You have Tim Healy, who is also a New York beat writer. This is another New York beat writer, a reliable guy, saying Pete Alonso is in deep contract talks with the Jays. I will believe Alonso Mets breakup only when I see it, but it is closer than ever to reality. You have 2 reporters, very reliable, saying they're in deep talks. But then you have Shi Davidi coming out and saying, contrary to speculation, Blue Jays discussions with Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer are not gaining momentum. They tell Ben Nicholson-Smith and, of course, Shi Davidi. As you start to think about what this means going forward, right? Things are getting absolutely out of hand here. And you have Shi Davidi and Ben Nicholson-Smith coming out and saying the opposite. You have Hector Gomez calling out the reporters. They said the same thing about my report on the Blue Jays and Anthony Santander. Now, what he's referring to is you also have MLB Scoops, who has gotten a ton of things right this offseason, but whether or not you want to, believe him is up to you. But he's also saying the Jays and Pete Alonso are nearing an agreement. So that's another reporter that is saying they're nearing an agreement. Of course, you have Doug Doucette originally, who dropped the news here. And as I go through all these reports, and again, Hector Gomez also came out and said originally, amidst all this, that the Jays were nearing a deal with Anthony Santander, or that, they're in deep talks, and then quote tweeted that about a couple hours ago and said talks are intensifying. Now, after he said talks are intensifying, you have Shi Davidi come out and say this. He quoted that saying, "This is the same thing about my report on the Blue Jays and Anthony Santander deal," which is true. Hector Gomez did have the Anthony Santander deal. Shi Davidi and Ben Nicholson-Smith threw some smoke on it, saying it's not officially done yet. All these things, very similar situation to what we have right now. And that deal ultimately got done. So in what has been a ridiculous day, starting with Doug Doucette saying, the Scherzer and Alonso, both deals are done. And again, this guy was kind of a nobody. No one really knew him. Nobody when it comes to being a reporter, obviously, is he tweets about the Jays and the Leafs and all these things. But when it comes to being a reporter, he's not known in the industry. So you have that to start, and then you start to see, again, no one really believed this guy, but then you have Tim Healy, a notable Mets beat writer, piling in saying this. You have Andy Martino, a very, very reliable beat writer, coming in and saying this. And if you remember, he was also one of the ones who said that Pete Alonso is probably not going to return to the New York Mets. That was one of the reports that came out after they re-signed Jesse Winker. That was one of the biggest reports that came out from that, from that signing. So then you have multiple reporters who are saying the same thing. And this begs the question, why did Shi Davidi and Ben Nicholson-Smith have a different, tune? Why are they not hearing the same thing? There's a few different reasons for this. One, Shi Davidi and Ben Nicholson-Smith haven't really broken any Jays news this offseason. They've broken some Mets news. Ben Nicholson-Smith has. They haven't really broken a ton of news. The most notable thing they broke around the Jays was the fact that they were in talks with Anthony Santander a couple days before the signing happened. Now, what could be happening here, and what would be a worst nightmare for Toronto Blue Jays fans, because we're already back in now, right? Like, at this point, there's multiple different reporters, reliable ones, saying the talks are intensifying. This could be a huge leverage play. Now, let's not forget that this is a Scott Boras client. Pete Alonso, and that's the focus of this video. Max Scherzer would come after, but Pete Alonso is a Scott Boras client. Now, Scott Boras clients, obviously Scott Boras is going to get as much money as he can for his client. There's a very good chance that the reason they're saying this is two different reasons. The one is that they're being used as leverage, the Toronto Blue Jays, that is. So the Mets and Scott Boras are saying, okay, Scott Boras is going to say, hey, leak this information about the Jays, say the talks are almost done, intensifying, all this stuff. So that way, in lieu of all this stuff coming out, the Mets will have to offer more to get the deal done because he wants to stay in New York. That is a very possible option, the classic Blue Jays leverage play. And if that's the case, I mean, it's devastating for the fans. I think at this point, a lot of Jays fans are all in on Pete Alonso, especially because Jurickson Profar is now off the board. Now, you go with this, you think that's the case. That's a very possibility, and I'm going to say this now in case it ends up being the case. However, and that's because two of the people the most notable reporters who actually said this are New York beat writers. So they're probably being told this in order to help leverage the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, Hector Gomez, he's been pretty accurate too. He's saying it's a done deal. MLB Scoop's saying it's a done deal. You have, other random people saying it's a done deal. So that's like the question is what's going to happen going forward. So you look at his stats, he's incredible. Now, the other possibility in all of this, is that, as you start to think about who is leaking, what is actually happening, it's that they're telling, Schneider and Ben Nicholson-Smith are Rogers employees at the end of the day. They're telling them, okay, the deal's not done yet. There needs to be contract finalization. There needs to be physicals. Very similar to the Anthony Santander deal where we kind of knew or we figured it was going to happen and then boom, it happened 2 or 3 days later. It could be that the deal isn't done yet, maybe not gaining momentum necessarily, but that or at least they were told to say it's not gaining momentum, so hopefully they don't lose any of the leverage, and then they sign the deal in the next coming days. That's probably what I think is happening. But at the same time, I just think there's too much smoke. But with the Toronto Blue Jays, there never is too much smoke. I mean, there's a very real world where the Toronto Blue Jays lose out on this guy, and you look at his stats again, I mean, he would be an incredible fit with this team, whether or not you're going to put him at first base, and all the reports are saying they're not going to trade Vladdy, so it would just be a powerhouse lineup, and then you get Max Scherzer. So much smoke today. It gets shut down by Shai Davidi. It gets picked back up by two notable Mets writers. Like, what are fans supposed to believe at this point when the reports are this few and far between? Like, they're so close together. But the actual reports are very different. And as we, go through the night here, more and more reports are going to come out. We're going to keep you up to date. If anything drops tonight, I'll, of course, have you with the latest news. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it seems like a deal is approaching, whether or not it's using, unless the Jays are being used as leverage. And if that's happening, it's just a really bad case scenario. I think ultimately they get the deal done. I think that's what's going to happen here. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it was one of the crazier days. And we've had crazy days with Roki Sasaki. We've had crazy days with Ohtani Juan Soto. But this is, it's almost a different level. It's very similar to the Ohtani stuff and even the Roki Sasaki stuff. We just keep being led on. And if they don't get Pete Alonso here, it's not going to be as bad, but it would be a pretty devastating blow just to, not the reporting community, because obviously, none of us are going to believe every single report, but it's more so the fact that they've gotten this far and then now there's so many different reports. Let me know down below in the comment section, who do you believe out of all of these reporters? That's the big question. It's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward, but that'll wrap it up for me. If you're enjoying the daily content, again, I'm traveling, trying to pump out as much content for you as it comes out, and there's a ton of news on my travel day, but I still made sure to get you guys up to date with all the latest news, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. See you later. Cheers.